Coming up in our newscast tonight. Christmas celebrations are taking place in all corners of the country, including the capital, Seoul. Myeongdong Cathedral is holding various programs in tune with the spirit of the holidays, including charity events and carol singing. Beautiful lights and lanterns adorn Cheonggae Plaza, complete with a giant Christmas tree. Seoul and Tokyo hold talks for the first time on wartime forced labor compensation issues after a ruling in October from the nation's Supreme Court. South Korean Director General for Northeast Asian Affairs Kim Yong-gil and his Japanese counterpart exchanged their stances on the matter and agreed to continue close coordination to minimize its effect on the two countries' relations. This year, more than 50 BMW cars caught fire due to faulty engine parts here in Korea. While the auto giant said it just found out back in July what caused the fires, it turns out the company was already aware of the flaws as early as 2015. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. It's almost Christmas and people here in the nation are getting in the festive spirit. Our Seoul is standing by at the Cheonggae Plaza where there are some visual extravaganza going on there. But first, we start by going straight to our Hongyu, who is in Myeongdong, one of the main shopping districts in Seoul. And you, I understand, you're at an iconic location, which is especially bustling with activities during this time of the year. What's it like there at this very hour?
Good evening, Daniel. More people are coming here to the Myeongdong Cathedral to attend a special Christmas Mass to celebrate the birth of Jesus, which starts at 12 midnight. And as now people are off work, many are gathering here to do some last Christmas shopping. In front, there is a Christmas market open since last Saturday. The parish is selling some handcraft goods, Christmas ornaments, and some snacks, with the profit being donated for those in need. The market will continue until tomorrow. And tomorrow you can see some Christmas carols being sung here as the boy band and a children's carols is playing the Christmas carols. And also there is a play going on, which is What Man Is Lived By, written by Tolstoy. This play has been going on at 5 p.m. today and at 8 p.m. tonight. The play will also take place for a Christmas night at 5 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. And okay, back to you and Merry Christmas, Daniel.
All right, Merry Christmas to you too, Hongyu. Thank you for the details so far. Now let's go to Cheonggae Plaza in downtown Seoul, which is holding a festival to celebrate one of the world's most widely celebrated holidays. Our Seoul has been soaking up the festive ambiance even before our newscast began. Eun-kyung, do fill us in on the dazzling displays and celebrations going on around you.
Hi Daniel, I am out here at Cheonggae Plaza where the Seoul Christmas Festival is taking place. Just about several hours ago in the ceremony, they turned all the Christmas lights and lanterns, and there is a huge crowd despite the cold. There's a giant Christmas tree shaped like layer cake, decorated with 72 toy soldiers, which gave it a sort of fairy tale atmosphere. The festival goes along Cheonggae Stream for 1.2 kilometers right through downtown Seoul, from Cheonggae Plaza to the bridge near Jonggak Station. And all along the way, there are these LED light sculptures like Christmas trees, Santa's village, Christmas presents, angels, and the baby Jesus. Tonight, there is a choir of about 60 people singing Christmas songs, a solo violin performance, and later on in the night, a DJ playing some dance music. Then we go on until 11 p.m. There will also be an event here for New Year's Eve, and then the festival will wrap up on January 1st. Other places in Seoul are celebrating Christmas too. Sinchon is one of the most popular places for young people, and through Christmas Day, it will be holding concert on the street. And Seoul Plaza and Dongdaemun Design Plaza are putting on a series of performances until New Year's Eve, and there are food trucks there and homemade Christmas-themed goods for sale. So tonight through New Year's, if you can, come and check out one of the many events being held throughout the capital. Back to you, Daniel.
All right, guys, thank you for being out there for us. I know it's freezing and it's crazy busy out there. We appreciate the report. Christmas is more than just about colorful decors and gift exchanging. Doing what little we can to help those who are less fortunate is the true spirit of the holidays. Keep that in mind when you hear the Salvation Army bell ringing while you're out and about. Yoon Jung-min turns the spotlight to how they steadfastly impact the world.
우리의 작은 사랑이 어려운 이웃들에겐 큰 힘이 됩니다.
At Christmas, millions of people around the world celebrate the spirit of Jesus who helped those in need. Every winter on the streets of cities around the world, the Salvation Army ring bells to raise money to help our neighbors in need. In Seoul, the shopping district of Myeongdong is always bustling with people, and even more so during Christmas. Despite the cold, the Salvation Army and their red kettles come out every year and have almost become a symbol for this area. The Salvation Army Korea territory is celebrating its 90th anniversary since it began raising funds in 1928 to provide humanitarian aid to those in need. The charity plans to collect some $5.8 million by the end of this year, with over 400 Salvation Army groups across the nation.
The Salvation Army provides humanitarian aid to deliver the love of Jesus. We're proud to volunteer for this job. Even though the weather is cold, we'll be pleased if a lot of people participate in the fundraising.
The donations will be used to serve those in need, including children, the elderly, single moms, and others who need help.
The elderly who are in need suffer from the cold during winter. I hope my donation is used to help those people stay warm.
I just wanted to help people who just need things more than we do.
I donated money for the poor children so that they can live a better, happier life.
The warm hearts of those who sacrifice their time or donate to those in need remind us of the love of Jesus and the true meaning of Christmas. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Officials from Seoul and Tokyo sat down for talks for the first time on the forced labor issue since the South Korean Supreme Court ruled that a Japanese steelmaker must compensate Koreans victims for their unpaid labor during World War II. Today, the victims also said they will go ahead with seizing the company's assets in Korea. Park Ki-jun gets us up to speed with the developments.
Officials from South Korea and Japan held their first face-to-face talks on Monday about the recent rulings on wartime forced labor. South Korea's Director General for Northeast Asian Affairs Kim Yong-gil and his Japanese counterpart Kenji Ganasugi met in Seoul for the first time since the Supreme Court in Seoul ruled in October that Japan's Nippon Steel and Sumitomo Metal Corporation has to compensate the Koreans it forced to work without pay during Japanese colonial rule. Kim told reporters that they exchanged their views on the matter of compensation and agreed to continue close cooperation to minimize its effect on South Korea-Japan relations. They also agreed to work together to move past their history and strive for future-oriented relations. Japan has been protesting against the ruling, arguing that the 1965 agreement between the two countries settled all reparation-related issues. But there was a slight shift in tone when Foreign Minister Taro Kono said that Japan understands the difficulties that South Korea faces in responding to the court's decisions, and that it won't rush Korea into making a decision right away. Ganasugi, who is also Tokyo's top nuclear envoy, also sat down with his other South Korean counterpart, Lee Do-hoon, to talk about North Korea's denuclearization. They discussed ways to restart dialogue between Pyongyang and Washington and agreed to continue to cooperate closely on North Korea-related issues. The same day, the four South Korean plaintiffs in the labor court case against the Japanese steel company announced that they will begin procedures to have the Japanese steel company's assets in the country seized. The lawyers representing the victims had warned the company that they would do so unless it responded to the court's verdict by 5 p.m. on December 24th. In October, Seoul Supreme Court ordered the firm to pay $87,000 to each of the four plaintiffs in the ruling. But with no response from the firm, the victims plan to move forward with the plan. However, they will take into consideration any developments stemming from the ongoing diplomacy on the matter. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Tokyo claimed over the weekend a South Korean warship used its targeting radar to aim at a Japanese patrol plane. Today, Seoul's defense ministry reiterated that it used a different system and was trying to find a North Korean boat that had gone adrift. For details, let's turn to our Park Ji-won.
South Korea's defense ministry says the destroyer's fire control radar was not directed at the Japanese aircraft, and in fact, the targeting system was never used. Rather, it was a search radar employed in a routine search operation.
As we already announced, our military conducted a standard humanitarian rescue operation. We once again stressed that no actions were taken that would make Japan feel threatened. If there are any misunderstandings, Japan and the Republic of Korea can resolve them through bilateral communications and consultations following standard processes.
Last Friday, Japanese Defense Minister Takeshi Iwaya told reporters that a Japanese P-1 patrol aircraft was locked down by a South Korean warship's fire control radar, a move considered extremely dangerous and one that even could spark an accidental engagement. After that, South Korea's defense ministry said the Navy destroyer was not aiming at the Japanese plane, but was using its search radar to find a North Korean vessel that had drifted into international waters. The South Korean defense ministry also said it had already explained the situation to Japan. In Monday's regular press briefing at the Defense Ministry, officials from the Joint Chiefs of Staff insisted that the South Korean destroyer was using a 3D radar developed by the Netherlands called MW08, and not the STIR 180 targeting radar as Japan had claimed. And later they said the South Korean destroyer used its optical camera to identify the Japanese plane, which they said was flying abnormally low.
Generally, it is very unusual for other countries' patrol aircraft to pass over another country's destroyer. That's why our destroyer was using the optical camera attached to the radar to monitor the Japanese aircraft. During the process, there was no emission of electromagnetic waves.
The Defense Ministry officials also explained regarding the radio communication sent by the Japanese plane to the South Korean destroyer, a weak connection meant the message could not be fully understood on the South Korean side. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The two Koreas will hold a special event to mark the start of their joint transport project on Wednesday morning. According to Seoul's Unification Ministry, the groundbreaking ceremony for linking and modernizing railway and roads between the two Koreas will be held at North Korea's Panmun Station. 100 guests from each side, as well as high-level officials from China, Russia, and Mongolia will be taking part. Seoul says the ceremony is to show the two Koreas' firm will to continue cooperating on the project. There will be additional detailed surveys after the ceremony, and the actual construction will proceed later in accordance with progress on Pyongyang's denuclearization and waivers on sanctions. The two sides wrapped up their joint railway inspections earlier this month and finished their road surveys today. Dozens of South Korean officials are in the north as an advance team to prepare for Wednesday's ceremony. Raising the minimum wage, one of the key policies of the Moon Jae-in administration, carried out earlier this year, and there are plans for a double-digit hike in 2019. But as the move was met with some criticisms, the government announced some relevant revisions to the law. Kim Hye-sung outlines what they are.
The South Korean government says it'll include weekend work in the calculation of the minimum wage, but exclude contracted holidays from working hours.
The Ministry of Employment and Labour has decided to make revisions to the Minimum Wage Act and includes paid weekend work hours on top of the existing fixed work hours.
The announcement comes despite opposition from the private sector, who claim the move would make labor costs even more of a burden. The government raised the minimum wage by 16.4% on year in 2018, and another 11% rise is slated for next year. The minimum wage is determined by calculating an hourly rate. Most Korean companies recognize 8 hours over the weekend as weekend working hours for employees who work 5 days a week. To calculate the minimum wage, the monthly wage is divided by the number of working hours to get the actual paid hourly wage. So including the weekend work hours of around 35 hours a month would mean that the same monthly wage would work out as a lower hourly wage, resulting in some companies failing to meet the figure of 8,350 Korean won or $7.4 an hour, the minimum wage set for 2019. To alleviate the private sector's concerns, the labor minister said,
At the cabinet meeting, we've decided to add revisions to exclude contracted holidays from the minimum wage calculation.
Contracted holidays are not legal holidays and refer to holidays such as family events or company foundation day, which are agreed upon by the labor and management and work contracts. The government will also provide a grace period of up to 6 months so companies can adapt to the changes in the minimum wage. Policymakers said they'll finalize the revision and introduce it at the cabinet meeting next Monday. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
More than 50 cars made by BMW caught fire in Korea this year. Faulty engine part was suspected to be causing the blaze. After a probe that's went on for months, the nation's transport ministry and a team of investigators from the government and private sector concluded that is the case. According to our Choi Si-young, the shocking revelation is this: the German auto giant deliberately tried to conceal the problem.
The fires were caused by a faulty engine part known as exhaust gas recirculation, which caused coolant to leak. BMW told the Transport Ministry it only became aware of the problem in July this year. But it turns out the auto giant knew something was wrong with the part as early as 2015. First, the faulty engine part. Before the investigation, BMW admitted that something was wrong with it, but said there were other factors that could cause a fire, like the car traveling at high speed or over a long distance. The investigation team said that's not true and that the automaker should not have designed the engine part the way it did. In other words, the part was made wrong from the start. Second, the cover-up. According to the investigation team, BMW's South Korean unit was aware of the faulty EGR in 2015, since it established a task force at its German headquarters at the time to tackle the problem. The investigators say they are turning over their findings to prosecutors. They also want BMW Korea to pay a fine of roughly $10 million for issuing a recall of the cars too late. BMW Korea said findings coincide with its own assertion that the EGR is the problem, and it said replacing the part fixes it. But it has yet to answer the question of why the part had a problem in the first place. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
Elsewhere around the world, the death toll from the tsunami that struck parts of Indonesia near the Sunda Strait on Saturday has risen to nearly 281 as of Monday. More than 1,000 are injured and dozens remain missing. On Saturday evening, coastal areas on the islands of Sumatra and Java were hit by a tsunami which is believed to have been triggered by the eruption of the Anak Krakatau volcano. According to authorities, the death toll is likely to rise further. We continue our look back at the biggest domestic news stories of the year. In 2018, the Me Too movement exploded into the public consciousness. It helped bring to light sex crimes by men of power and influence, abusing their authority, with victims speaking up and taking a stand. Our Oh Si-young zooms in on how it's helping women fight for a future free of sexual harassment and abuse.
It started with a confession from female prosecutor Seo Ji-yeon, who revealed the sexual harassment she'd suffered under a then-incumbent senior official of the Justice Ministry. The Me Too movement broke out with full force in South Korea in January, as Seo's televised interview led to public fury over the mistreatment and the career setback she had faced after she initially reported the incident. Seo Ji-yeon's case was followed by more revelations by women who came forward to accuse influential men in South Korean society, mostly in political and cultural circles. These include a provincial governor and former Liberal presidential contender who stepped down after his former secretary accused him of rape on multiple occasions. A renowned filmmaker and an artistic director were charged with rape, and a potential Nobel Prize-winning poet was also disgraced after accusations of sexual harassment, with his poems removed from school textbooks. The movement soon spread across universities, schools and workplaces as girls and women began speaking out. This soon gave rise to Korea's own With You movement, where women rallied to show support for the female victims. The movement also represents the stand against Korea's traditionally patriarchal society and work culture, which has made women all the more vulnerable to abuse and discrimination, while the country's conservative culture is deemed to have stifled them from speaking out. The World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Survey shows South Korea ranks 115th out of 149 countries in terms of gender equality when it comes to economic participation and opportunities, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. Since the start of the Me Too movement, there have been growing calls for stronger laws to prevent and punish sexual violence and harassment, especially in the workplace. And fundamentally, many have raised the need to root out the long-standing culture of discrimination against women and to listen to those who raise gender issues rather than dismissing them as overzealous feminists. Experts say perceptions of gender issues have been changing for the better in the light of the Me Too and With You movements this year. But in order to go forward, more support for women and gender education is needed across all aspects of society. 오수영, Arirang News.
It's been an historic year in terms of Pyongyang-Washington ties. After 7 decades of hostility, the two sides held their first ever summit. There's a standstill in nuclear negotiations for now, but there were some noteworthy accomplishments as well. Here's Lee Ji-won with a rundown of the developments thus far.
On June 12th, North Korea and the U.S. held the first ever historic summit of their leaders when Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump met in Singapore. The leaders agreed on 4 points: to establish diplomatic relations for North Korea's security guarantee and to denuclearize the Korean peninsula. Some said their joint declaration was vague, but many, like Shin Bum-chul, senior fellow at the Asan Institute, saw great meaning in the summit itself.
The fact that North Korea and the U.S. moved away from their war of words in 2017 and started to talk is a positive development.
Before and after that summit, there were many other signs of progress. The North Korean leader announced in April that his regime will not conduct nuclear and missile tests. South Korea and the U.S. suspended a number of joint military exercises. North Korea blew up its nuclear test site at Punggye-ri, returned the remains of some 50 American soldiers killed during the Korean War, and released 3 Korean Americans it had detained. But there were some rough patches too. North Korea criticized some in the Trump administration who continued to push a hardline stance. At one point, strong rhetoric from the North led President Trump to cancel the summit. And even though the summit did happen as planned, North Korea and the U.S. have different ideas about how denuclearization should proceed and what the rewards should be for each step along the way. Right now, talks seem to be at a standstill. A high-level meeting that was supposed to happen in November was postponed at North Korea's request, supposedly for scheduling reasons. But officials reportedly said that Pyongyang actually wasn't ready. And despite the U.S. reaching out, reports say the North has given no indication about when those talks should be rescheduled.
I think the current stalemate is related to the verification of the North denuclearization. The U.S. wants to talk with the North at a high-level meeting about a thorough declaration and verification process to make sure that there are concrete agreements reached at next year's summit. But it seems Pyongyang prefers top-down decision-making and wants to first hold the summit early next year.
President Trump and Secretary Pompeo have both expressed hopes of holding the second North Korea-U.S. summit in January or February. But in order for that to happen, Shin says the two sides must build firm trust in each other and come up with an overall roadmap to move forward with a shared understanding. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, the weather changed radically in just one day. What's the forecast looking like for Christmas?
Well, Daniel, luckily Christmas Day will take place in relatively comfortable weather conditions. For one, Find Us is out of the picture. And although we won't have a white Christmas, we won't have a dusty one either. Now, nevertheless, some precipitation might fall in the central regions in the late afternoon, including flurries or even drizzles. And while most parts of East Asia will be cloudy. And Christmas morning temperatures in the country are looking crisp. Seoul wakes up to -2 degrees Celsius, while Chuncheon is a lot colder at -8 degrees. And the mercury will recover to show positive readings by noon, though, with a lot more clouds approaching as well. Seoul will rise up to 5 degrees, while Busan and Jeju goes up into the teens. And starting Thursday, the morning lows in the capital will plunge down to -11 degrees, and it's expected to stay cold throughout the remaining days of this year. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for you in tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Thank you for watching. Wherever you may be tuning in from, here's wishing you a very Merry Christmas.